here, many of you may have spoken with in the past. He's our manager of support at Central Desktop. Prior to Central Desktop, Kevin actually worked as a local graduate school advisor, where he served others, served students. So he loves serving people, he loves helping people. And he has 2 little boys at home as well. In addition, I'm excited to bring up Rob. Many of you, I'm sure, are baseball fans. Rob Boysko actually works at MLB.com, and if you ever see those replays, all of those go through our system. So Rob was in charge of making sure that process happens through the database, which we'll talk a little bit about. Rob's the multimedia publishing manager at MLB.com, and he championed the use of Central Desktop from an initial 10 users up to over 500 today. So with that in mind, let me go ahead and bring up Kevin first.
Good morning. Thank you, Caitlin. That was excellent. So today we're going to be diving into some nitty-gritty database work, looking at how we can blaze a path to success with automated workflow. Just a quick intro about me. I'm actually a Southern California native, so I actually grew up about 20 minutes from here. And I've been married for the past 11 years with 2 beautiful boys over in Pasadena. And as Rob knows, I'm a big-time Dodger fan. Appreciate it. So I'll be doing a higher-level look at databases and automated workflow here, and Rob's going to dive in and show you what it looks like from his use case. We're hoping that'll give you a breadth of view of what you can do with this. Today, for our agenda, we'll be looking at what is a database, just kind of read a general definition there, and what you can do with a database. And then we're going to be talking about how you can create workflows if you haven't done that before or you haven't done a lot of it. We'll take a look at all those and all the different rule types and dive into some of the advanced criteria there, and then we'll follow up the end with an advanced workflow tip, how you can kind of use our emailing capabilities to actually have databases create content for you in Central Desktop. So the standard definition of what is a database. It's a structured set of data held in a computer, especially one that is accessible in various ways, which is great for Central Desktop because this is something you can access all across the different platforms you use. Databases are ideal for purchase orders, contracts, work orders. You might even have a contacts database set up in your workspaces. You might actually even have a vendor database set up in your workspaces. And finally, you might have even a paid time off request database in your workspaces. These are some examples of how you can use databases and gather that data from one workspace to another or all housed in the same workspace. I know myself, we use the paid time off request quite a bit to be able to gather that data with a web form on one workspace and have it sent and notify the manager that needs to make that approval. That's just an example of ways you can speed that process up. So what can a database do? Using Central Desktop, you can actually sort and filter records so you can find what you need to find. You can create customized views so that when your users navigate to that database, it's going to filter that information automatically for them based on that view that you've set up, and they'll see what they need to see. One great feature you can use is our subscription views. So this is where you can actually create subscriptions for those custom views that you've created. If you find yourself sending out content or updates to people on a regular basis, and you want that automated, you can set it to notify members of the workspace or even non-members of that workspace, and they can have that database view set up to them automatically. You can use web capture forms to gather data from external areas. So this is one great thing where you can use it on external sites or even on maybe an intranet page where you're gathering feedback from others. You can have it send that data into a workspace where maybe not everyone has access to that database and you can work with it. And then finally, what we'll be looking at today is you can create workflow rules that will trigger tasks, notifications, or other actions based on the activity in the database. And one nice thing about our records is it allows you to assign tasks and make comments or even have files that are uploaded and linked directly to those records. So that's kind of a higher level look at them. When we're looking at creating database workflows, there's some important things to remember here. The workflows themselves are specific to the databases. So when you navigate into your workspace and you navigate to the database you want to work with, you actually click on that database name and you're going to be taken to your content. That's where you're going to find this options menu on the right-hand side there where you can see that workflow option. That menu is what ties those workflows to that database, so we know whatever actions you're creating in that workflow are going to tie right specifically to that database. Another thing to keep in mind is that this requires the workspace administrator permission. So not every user is going to be able to go in there and mess with your workflows, change things up, and you want to make sure that you train those admins properly so they can do so. So we have 4 rule types with databases. We have email notifications. This could be just a general one. Task creation, where you can handle some project management in there. Action-oriented workflows, where you could have certain things happening in a database that are going to set specific fields. And then proof generation, if you're using a review and approve tool. So for rule types, the general email notifications can be as simple as notifying members and non-members of entries. Hey, we got this. Or this has been submitted, and based on the fields selected, you've been notified because we need some action taken on this. It can also be a follow-up email to let the submitter know that it's been received. So if you have contact information being gathered on an external site or an order form that's going through, you can say, we received your order, someone will be contacting you soon. PTO requests that we use quite a bit, we'll send that to the manager directly. And we actually have a tag to create a task that we'll talk about here at the bottom. So you can create a task based on the database entry, and this can allow you to use the project management tool in Central Desktop to actually have users know when they need to follow up on records and things that need attention. So if you have users that are consistently hiding their email or losing their email, or that it's not a good way for them to keep track of what they're doing, due dates can actually be set in these tasks, and those are the areas that they'll see in the My Calendar, in the dashboard area, or even the My Task section that will keep them connected to those records that they need to follow up on. One thing to note as something that you can use databases for, any date field you use in the database that's requiring the information that you're gathering can actually be set into the task start and due dates also. So you can use that data in the database to kind of create the time frame for those tasks. For the action workflow rules, you can actually take action on specific fields. So you can set specific fields based on actions in the workspace. And you can even use a check nightly rule to auto-populate those fields. So a lot of times I had a report I would run where I needed to have a month field created based on the time frame when the database was created. So one example was I had a workflow rule that would say if this was created between September 1st through September 30th, automatically set this other field to September 2014. And it would run nightly and just populate that field for me automatically. And finally, you can create a proof via the database files. So you can keep all that project information or the proofs that you're working on at a database level and use the Files tab to drop files in to start proofs automatically. So when you drop it into that tab underneath the database, it's going to kick off a proof right away. You can use proof groups to automatically kick off proofs to specific people that need to work on that content. One important thing to note here is that the workflow creator must have a proof license for the rule to generate proofs properly. That'll make sure that if users that don't have proof licenses are dropping those in, the proof is still going to generate and kick off on behalf of the creator of the workflow rule. And finally, with the advanced criteria notifications, this is the area where you can choose when to kick off your workflow. So what needs to happen? Is it when it's added? Is it when it's modified or when it's deleted? How often do you want the rule to run? Is it check nightly? Is it instantaneous? And then who should be notified? You can actually use database fields, whether it's member fields or email fields, to actually notify those areas right away. You can set it to notify specific people every time that action occurs. It could be a member or a non-member, so you can use external email addresses. And you can even choose to subscribe the users to the record. So let's dive in and actually take a look at what this looks like in an advanced area here. What I want to show you today is how you can generate a statement of work directly from your database entries. This is going to let your database records gather the information that you need, and it's going to auto-populate that information into a workflow rule that's going to email it in to Central Desktop, creating an online document that you can print and send to a client. So let's quickly dive into my workspace here. There we are. So this is my customer support workspace in our test account here. In this workspace, I have a database setup and a file discussion setup. And when I look at step one, I think I don't need to dive in. It's like I lost my place, didn't I? That was lucky guess. So for part A here, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add the no reply at central desktop to the workspace. And this is our standard system email. We're gonna add this as an external member. What it's gonna allow is us to email contact back into the workspace and not get that error message that it's not allowed. The second thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a new folder where I want those SOWs to go. And we're gonna copy the email address out of that folder that's for creating new online documents. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have a database set up that has the fields we want to store that information and to put it into the discussion. And then we're going to create that database workflow rule using that content and the variable fields to send that out. So let's get out of here and then take a look at the nitty-gritty. So for my database, I have an SOW database right here. That's the setup. I want to show you quickly the fields I'm using to gather this data. It's very simple. I have a requester, I have a vendor, I have services, I have scope of services, contacts, maximum compensation and payment, and then the start date for that SOW. Kept it simple. I put in default values in here that'll tell the user what they should be supplying for me as the manager that's going to oversee this information. In the files area, I have my SOW folder right here at the bottom. And I've created a template for this SOW. And the reason why I did this was so that I wouldn't have to have any knowledge of HTML or code that I'd want to plug into this workflow tool. So I created this template in Central Desktop, got it looking the way I wanted it to look, used this image, which is actually going to carry over in the workflow rule too. And you can see I've highlighted the areas where I'm going to take that data from the database and I'm going to plug in the values into those sections. So these are all the sections that are going to carry over from the database once I kick off that rule. So let's take a look at those workflow rules I have listed here. I have two in this database right now. I have one that's going to kick off a new SOW request. This is a very generic, hey, someone submitted a SOW request, take a look at this when it's added, and automatically notify Jeff Brown. So I've got an email notification, I've got when the record is added, and I have the notification option right there. This is always going to notify him. The second one I've set up is our approval process. So I don't want these SOWs to be generated right away. I don't want people to run with them and start presenting them for the work to be done. Someone needs to look it over. Someone needs to edit a field that wasn't there when the record was actually created, called just a status approval field. And then that's going to kick off what we talked about in our advanced area here. It's going to be another email notification, but instead, this time, it's when the record is modified and when the status is changed to approved. Once that happens, it's going to email that folder option like I talked about for the SOW folder. This is the specific email address for creating online documents for that one folder. And it's taking all that code from the online document that I created and it's placing it here along with any variables that inserted from the database record itself. So I know this doesn't look like something you can read here, but I've used all these database fields here in the available merge fields. This is where I can plug in this information from the database, and it's going to stay dynamic. So whatever changes, whatever someone submits for the vendor, is always going to plug in that value where I place that vendor variable in this HTML file. So just a quick look here. If I hit edit page and choose the HTML option, so I'm someone who, I don't want to know how to use HTML, I don't need to know. I've created this online document here. I just hit this, and I'm just going to copy this code and bring it over to the workflow rule. That's all I did. Select all and copy, along with plugging in those variables. We'll cancel that. So let's see how this works. So I've got a new record here. I'm not going to fill in too much information. I'm going to choose my vendor. I'm not going to change the default values, so that'll all stay populated in there. ask for $1,000, and a start date, when I go big, right? And a start date of September 12th. Save and done. So there's my database record is created right away. Immediately, my email was sent to my user, as soon as I refresh, there it is, saying Kevin Lewis has submitted the following SOW, and it's waiting for your approval. So that was sent to my Jeff Graham user, who's always going to be there. He's going to open this up, take a look at that same record that we were just viewing, and say, okay, this looks great. Perfect on the first try. I'm going to change it to approved. Now note, I could make some comments here on the record, ask for some more feedback. I could upload anything I want to here to make sure that it's ready to go. But I'm going to click approved. And that automatically has created our SOW in this folder. It's like emailing it back in with that email address. So you can see it's plugged in the new information, keeping the exact same framework I had before, and it's populated the exact same fields that I use in that database record. So we should see here the compensation of payment is not to exceed $1,000 for the performance of all services, along with the contract date down here, September 12th, and I even have the vendor name here of something that can be signed off on. So this is something that we can print as a PDF and send off to the vendor to sign and approve. So for my best practice when it comes to using advanced workflow rules, working in support and trying to make sure we narrow down and find out issues for anyone, is put the name of the workflow rule at the bottom of your notifications. So if you can be at the very bottom, kind of an asterisk, workflow rule name, and asterisk. This is if you're going to be using a lot of workflow rules in your workspaces. So if some sort of process changes, and all of a sudden you see workflow rules kicking off, and you're not sure why they are, and you're trying to troubleshoot that issue, you'll know of the 1,000 workflow rules that you have going, which one it is by that title that's listed on there at the bottom. For learning more, you can always visit our database section of our help center at help.centraldesktop.com. You can always send questions to myself and our support team at support@centraldesktop.com, or you can always give us a call. We actually have a top 9 most valuable or least known SocialBridge features article in our blog. So this is one of the areas that's covered there. You can view more in depth about that. And there's a lot of information in there to make that happen. And like Katie said, join our CD community to learn from others and grow in that area. Are there any questions? Yes?
Hi. I'm really interested in the proofing workflow, or kind of just the water business that in terms of using the database, you actually like house all the documentation for the artwork and whatnot in the database, and then you can upload it?
So a lot of times our customers will use the database as kind of like a project overhead. That information about the client already is in that record. And any proofs that they kick off for that client, they'll literally just drag files into that files and discussions area of the record, and it's going to automatically kick off that proof based on the settings you've done in the workflow. So you can keep it all centralized. So there's a files and discussions tab at the bottom of the record. So technically it is in files and discussions, but it's all connected to the database itself. Let me show you what that looks like. I have it right here. The bottom of this record, you'll see these tabs. You can drop in files here, and it'll keep everything connected to that one record at the top. It'll let you know what those files apply to. Kind of similar to how you might use a folder structure if you're just keeping folders for clients, but this allows you to keep some more content and record variables that you can use.
I didn't realize you could pick up or get an actual proof.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I saw another question. Yes?
I was wondering, in addition to kicking off the creations of new tasks, can you also place a new event on your calendar?
Not at this time. I know that's something that our product team has heard about, and Chris will speak more to that one. But yeah, for the creation of calendar events, not yet. But the nice thing is the task will show up on the calendar, but I agree.
So I believe there's a functionality where you can email a file to the
Yes. Yeah, so you can, each database record has its own, let's find the email for this record, has its own email addresses. Whether you want to create new online documents, attach a file, which would be uploading a new file for it, or even starting discussions or comment emails. So if you have records that are staying there indefinitely, but you always want to throw up a file really quickly to that record, I constantly create contacts in my email list that are specific to areas where I can write and type that name really quickly and send it in a file. So,
I have one more question.
yeah.
So when you're doing your proof, or, sorry, when you have a certain workflow for a group, you can actually assign a proof group
Yes.
to that folder.
Yes. You can assign the proof group to that database record or the database itself, and then based on the actions that are taking place or whatever you define, because it might be when this record contains these field values and someone drops in a file, kick off the proof. Anything else? All right, if you have any other questions, I'll be around all day doing the product demo and everything else, but thank you for your time.
Good morning. My name is Rob Boysko. I'm the manager of multimedia publishing with LB Advanced Media. And we use workflows a lot. I work a lot with Kevin to kind of set up our system to just scroll through and make our workflow on a nightly basis in the .com world a little faster and a little bit smoother to all groups. So we'll just get started here. That's me. As I mentioned, I am the multimedia manager at LB Advanced Media. I've been there for 9 seasons now. Been doing the publishing end of things for the last 7. And yes, as Kate mentioned, we started a little bit small with like 10 users back in 2009, and now we're up over 500 this year. LB Advanced Media, in case you guys haven't heard of us. We are the multimedia arm of Major League Baseball. We're actually a separate entity than MLB and Park Avenue, but we're run by the clubs and run with the clubs and work with them. We don't just do baseball anymore. We actually also are involved in streaming March Madness and streaming WWE, Glenn Beck television, and many other things that we've gotten into over the years, just as a streaming concept that we've brought up partners over the years to keep us busy throughout the year, because as long as baseball season can be, it is only 7 to 8 months of the year. So today, actually, we'll fill this out a little bit better, and so we're not just saying the challenge there. The challenge for us was to make sure that all of our content groups, be it editorial, multimedia, social, everybody that's working on a nightly basis on all the 15 games that are going on, are all getting notified and all knowing what the latest content is coming out through the system, where it's supposed to be on the site, who's sponsoring it, who owns it, and where, when it should be posted on the site. We were trying to send this emails each time. All of our editors were constantly back and forth with our editorial group and email and social. So we came up with a solution using the workflow that Kevin has outlined to just kind of streamline that and have our workers going through their normal process. But as they were updating fields, they would send off to let the social group know, hey, look, here's a new piece of content. This is where it should go. This is how you should post it. And then we'll get into some of the tips that I picked up along the way about where we should go and how the best way to go about doing it is. So we'll start with the challenges. As I mentioned, there was collaboration missing between our editorial, multimedia, and social groups. We just kind of exploded into the sponsored content realm in the past couple of years where, now we have our Budweiser has all of our walk-off plays, and Head and Shoulders sponsors the best pitching performances of the night. And it just became tough to keep track of, which one are we calling the Head and Shoulders play? Did it qualify for this? Is it up to par? And we needed one centralized location to make that decision and then get that out to everybody and all across the groups to make sure that the right ads were playing with that on the site, to make sure it's playing with the right skins on the sides of the website and all those types of things. So we were just missing that communication and trying to do it very, very manually and communicating back and forth, and sometimes those decisions would be made after the fact, or somebody was running with it as a certain type of play, but another group didn't realize it was, and it just kind of got to be a mess. So we wanted to centralize that information and that decision making. And then again, each time that these decisions were being made, the instructions needed to go out to make sure that we were doing it the right way each time, so all of our clients and all of our sponsors that are paying for content on MLB.com and on the team sites are getting the proper placement and the proper playback of their content. So what we came up with was the workflow that Kevin just outlined. We took fields like, we took the sponsor field, where you see there it says it's outstandings, and we started to build those workflows off of that, saying, okay, this is an outstanding clip. You've got to send it in. It needs to look this way. It needs to be posted that way. We took the post dates. If it's in the future, you say, okay, we need this content to go up tomorrow morning. It's not supposed to go up tonight. Save it. We don't need to see it. There's something being released tomorrow morning. So you use those post dates as a trigger. And then on the right, you kind of get into a little deeper of what Kevin was showing, where the entity was MLB on this clip. The post date is full and it's greater than today. So we know that if somebody's putting something out now, it doesn't necessarily need to fire off a task and notify anybody that it needs to be posted now. If it's going out now, everybody knows that it can go up now. But for something that needs to go up the next day or the next week, we want to make sure that we're tracking that and creating a task and creating a notification to say, hey, this content is going out, but we won't want it on the site until next week. And when next week comes around, we don't want it lost in the system of our budget. So we started creating workflows out of that. Here's where some of our, on the front end, ours aren't as elaborate as Kevin's were. That was pretty blew my mind, that proof. I'm going to have to start doing that with the detail. But our email notifications would come in and say, okay, hey, look, here's a new outstanding clip. Here's the link to it. Here's where it should be posted. Here's the topic ID, which gives it the right, playback scenario and the right schemes on it so that it gets playing back to the right sponsor. And an editorial note. So it's coming out each time, giving these guys the right notifications so that no matter who was working on the game, if they hadn't done it, if this program started on Tuesday and they didn't work till the following Saturday, they still got this notification. They didn't need to check back on their emails from the previous week and say, okay, what's new and what's going on. We got another one here for, this is just another one of, so here's Holiday Inn Express. It needs to go out here. Social, we need you to tweet it, looking this way. And then here's some of the task lists that would pop up and say, okay, here, this piece of content is due tomorrow. It's you shouldn't be posting it tomorrow or today, but when you come in the morning, take a look. This is at the top of your publishing homepage, and it's ready to go, all based off of those database fields that somebody entered when they added it. Nobody has to go back and look at them. The information is always right in front of their faces. When they come in and log in, the first thing they see is what they have to do for that day and what needs to be posted. And then just one more thing, another example of a simple notification that is constant each time. It gives you the posting instructions. So a user, when they fill in the field, will have a posting instruction set up saying, okay, this is what you're supposed to do. This clip needs to be processed as a short feature and sent to this email address so that everybody gets the right information. And then there's your link to it to process, and it goes off the site properly. So what we gained out of this was the email notifications. Now all of our groups, editorial, multimedia, social, were all simultaneously notified of new content. There wasn't that back and forth anymore. There wasn't any doubt about what was what. We all knew what was the content, and it all went out right on time. The record updates, you could take those date fields and say, okay, this program is running from September 1st to September 30th. And when September 1st rolls around, it triggers another field to say, hey, this is now live. Then on October 1st, it says, okay, this program is now inactive, and you don't have to worry about getting these notifications anymore. And you can always see what an active list of programs is or an active piece of content. The task management, as we pointed out, we have people that are assigned to each game. So if it looks and sees that, okay, Los Angeles and, what do I have? We'll say Los Angeles, San Francisco, it's a good game for that stretch. Somebody's assigned to that game, it sees that this piece of content needs to go out, needs to be created. Let's say Kershaw pitches an amazing game. We want to put together a pitching reel of that. We have an editor assigned to that game. Once the Kershaw pitching reel goes on the board, that person specifically will get a notification saying, hey, you have new content to edit. That doesn't mean it has to go to everybody across the board. It doesn't need to go to all of our editors, just the person specific to that game for that night. So it's nice to keep down everybody's individual email, but the right people get the information as they need it. And then it just created a completely more efficient system. Less time was needed updating these records, going back and forth with all the different groups. And we kept a nice clean system on a nightly basis now using our workflows. And I quote by Henry Ford, if everyone is moving forward together, then success takes care of itself. And we've honestly seen that using these workflows. Like it's cleaned up our system, it's cleaned up our back and forth with everybody, and we're taking care of our clients a lot better through using these workflows based off databases to just get the right information out to no matter who is working, first day in or one of our seasoned pros that's working. They all get the same information and they all know what to do with it each time. And best practice play. Think big. Evaluate your processes and look for things that you can just run through and say, okay, you know what? We hit a stumbling block here. Each time we add that record, somebody doesn't know, what's going on. Somebody's not getting their information, and somebody's left out of the gap. There's a gap in communication. We need to fill it in. There's definitely a workflow you can build for that. And as everybody else has mentioned previously, don't be afraid to fail with it. You are going to accidentally email some people that don't need to know the first time around, or you're going to fire off something that nobody needs to see, or you'll accidentally do it, which I've done plenty of times. But just keep trying and find the right workflow, find the right pattern, and people will be happy to start getting these emails and know what's going on instantly. And how to learn more, I would definitely recommend checking out the tutorials. And Kevin Lewis and his support crew has been awesome with me. They hear from me on a fairly regular basis, like, okay, wait, I'm trying this, it's not quite there, and they'll put me in the right direction. It's incredibly helpful. They really helped us build this out. And just to piggyback off of what Kevin said about the itemizing, and if you're going to have a ton of workflows, definitely make sure you label them. Because once you start getting in there, you're really not going to be able to know which workflow is what when all these emails start firing off. I think we're at the point of we probably use a good 400 to 500 workflows now between all of our workspaces. And if an email comes out, somebody's like, I don't need to be getting this anymore. It makes it so much easier when I go and say, okay, that's top play email number 45, and I just go in and shut that off or take that person off of that email, and they don't have to get it anymore, as opposed to picking and choosing out of the Google list. So that's pretty much all I have. Anybody have any questions on these? Sure.
I was wondering, so do you use these workflows in lieu of using workspace templates and task list templates, or are you creating templates that are kicked off by the database workflow?
Yeah, they're sort of in place of templates so that they just, because they're more one-to-one, there's not a lot of steps involved in a lot of them, so it is more of just a one-to-one. Okay, here's a task, this needs to be done on this item. In some of our new groups that, like in our design group that we just started to kind of expand this to, we're toying with the idea of setting up more in like a, kind of framing it more in a task template idea than just a one-to-one. But so far, the way we're using the tasks workflows is just going straight into one task and not a template. Good.
And it's all organized within several workspaces, or?
Yes, we're specific to that one workspace. We use it across multiples, probably 6 to 7 workspaces right now. We're using these heavily, and they'll all be displayed on the front page. Like here's what's coming up. Here's those tasks specific to that person or specific to that workspace will be displayed all in the group of these are the tasks that are part of this workspace, or I'm sorry, part of this database. So the task list itself is the database task list, as opposed to being something that you set up on your own. It just assigns the same tab that where we saw the file management. At the bottom, there's another tab for tasks. So you can either see that as a task list or you see it individually at the bottom of that database item, where it just says, here's a task for this, and this is the person that's assigned to it, and this is the person that knocked out, that cut this row for us. Anybody else? Great. Thank you very much.